Hi, and welcome to My Words, Our Journey, the podcast. We're in Season 6, Episode 4 of A Church for Pete. I'm Monty, your host and author. If you remember, Pete was relaxing in his chair, thinking about ways to promote the bookstore when he fell asleep, only to be awakened by the sounds of dogs. That's how we ended our last one. Today, we'll start with Chapter 12 and see what those dogs are all about. Pete didn't have a dog, let alone several, which is what it sounded like just outside his door on the front porch. He was startled awake by the sound, still in his recliner, TV still on. At some point, he had put a small blanket that he kept close over his legs. He didn't remember doing it. Pete didn't keep a gun in the house. Never really had thought about it much. But he did keep a couple of baseball bats handy. One by the front door, one next to the bed. As he turned on the porch light, grabbed the bat, and slowly opened the door, he could hear the dog's bark moving away. Still loud, but not as loud. He stood there, taking in the early morning. He didn't see the headlights until it was too late, and the vehicle was passing. The double honk came as he tried to move behind the wooden beam that supported the roof over the covered porch. When he decided the dogs were not coming back, and he would not be giving any more neighbors a show, Pete went back into the house. His pants, shirt, shoes, and socks lay next to his chair. Hadn't even crossed his mind to put on a shirt before confronting the furry beast that woke him from his slumber. He had no idea who'd be passing his place that time of the morning. As he looked at his watch, which lay atop the pile of clothes, it was only 20 minutes to 2 in the morning. Well, whoever it was probably didn't see he was only wearing his boxers. They were driving pretty fast, he thought, as he flopped back down in the recliner, turned the volume down a little on the television, and went back to sleep. The following morning, as he departed for work, Pete picked up the weekly paper and tossed it in his backpack, then tossed that into the passenger seat. He did not look at it for a few hours, but when he did, he noticed there was a reminder about the upcoming fall dance. It'd be held at the high school in only a few weeks. His first thought went to the pretty lady from the other day, but he was sure she was either married or in a relationship. How could she not be? So he sat with his morning coffee and stressed about if he was going to have a date or not. He, for a split second, thought about Stephanie, and then thought better. By then, it was time to open the doors. When it was slow, and he had straightened, wiped, swept, etc., for the upteenth time, he would find himself reading. Currently, he was reading a great book on the World War I, which he honestly knew very little about, but was learning a lot. Sometimes, he would get through a couple chapters before he'd get up, wander around. Other times, he would just get comfortable, and the chime would go off. He hadn't put a photo in yet. It was one of those things he was struggling with. He had thought about just posting his cell phone as the store number, but any time he said that idea out loud, he got blowback. His theory? It was a bookstore, not the front desk of a busy hotel. How many calls was he going to get? The verdict was still out, so no phone so far. He had learned a few things the last few days. No one in town liked a good cup of hot tea while browsing for a new read. He could realistically open 2 hours later each day because the only person he usually saw before 11 was the mailman. Maybe. And to this point, he was glad he had not hired anyone to help. As he contemplated all things the bookstore, the chime brought him back to reality. Before he could round the corner, Miss Perney was standing in front of him. She could move pretty well for her age. She looked the proverbial cat who just ate the canary. "Well, how are you this morning? I heard you were out dancing half naked on your porch in the middle of the night. Have you gone crazy, or are you a drinker?" Pete laughed and said, "Well, I'm not much of a drinker, so I must be going crazy." Miss Perney fixed what Pete was confident was the first cup of tea and took a seat. By the time she had left, he had learned that the neighbor at the end of the block had a daughter. She delivered newspapers, and she leaves early each morning, middle of the night actually, to go pick them up. He had also tried a couple of times to ask about the young lady from the other day, but just couldn't come to ask. Maybe he thought the idea was better than reality. She had to have someone. He was sure of that. And Miss Perney, when she walked out the door, without stopping, yelled, "Let's try church again this week, shall we?" Pete didn't let the door close all the way before he was on top of her. "Thank you so much for thinking about me, but I think I want to try somewhere else this week. Blessed to have lots of churches to visit in the area, you know." That didn't seem to go over well, but he was sure she'd be back, and he hoped she would be. Chapter 13. Saturday evening, Pete noticed the red light flashing on the answering machine. He was not accustomed to getting calls at home. He really didn't want the phone, but his internet provider said it was free with his most popular plan. So, he hit the play expecting to hear one message. Instead, 1. Pete. I hope I can call you Pete. This is Ralphie. Still holding that mower for you. If you remember, it's a zero turn. Really nice. Not for everyone because of the price and all, but boy, I know it'll make you happy every time you mow that large yard of yours. Ralphie, Home Supply. Call me, or I'll stop by. If I don't hear from you, I may stop by with the mower. Maybe we can give her a test drive. Okay, Ralphie, bye. 2. Mr. McDuffie, yes, this is Stephanie. We met the other day in your driveway. Well, I wanted to call and see if you'd like to have dinner. My cell phone is 555-619-2278. I look forward to hearing from you. 3. Pete, this is Phyllis Lovejoy. What is this I hear about you streaking down the road at all hours of the night? You seem like such a fine young man. Are you a druggie? Well, we'll be praying for you in our women's group. Well, okay. I'd like to go to dinner again soon. Druggie or not, I kind of like your company. 4. Mr. McDuffie, Pete. Jeremy Barnett, SMB, your wonderful local bank. I wanted to follow up on our wonderful conversation the other day. It seemed it'd be a good time to get together. I think you'd agree. Best to keep your business local when you can. Well, I'll talk to you soon. Maybe stop by that wonderful store of yours if I don't hear back. Well, wonderful. Jeremiah Burnett. Have a wonderful day. 5. Pete, Gretchen Turner, secretary at Plum Rose Baptist Church. Just a couple blocks from your lovely store, which I hear is going well. Congratulations. On behalf of the entire congregation, we'd like to invite you to Sunday morning worship. We begin at 10 with singing, followed by breakout sessions, Bible classes, Then we finish with a sermon from the Lord's Word. You can visit us on the website at www.prbc.net for more information. We look forward to worshiping with you on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. Have a blessed day. 6. Pete. I hope I can call you Pete. Ralphie, Home Supply. That mower isn't going by itself. Let me know if I should just drive over and deliver it to your house. No problem. We can do that today if you like. Small fee, but I'm sure it'd be okay. Ralphie, Home Supply. Still holding the zero turn mower for you. 7. Hello, friend. This is Mark Foster. Plum Rose Presbyterian Church on the corner of 1st and Main. The big one. Looks like it should be in Rome or Italy. Yes, that's us. Well, we just would love to have you join us Sunday for church. We begin at 9 o'clock with refreshments and light conversation, with the service starting at 9:30. 8. Pete? Pete! Gosh, Pete, are you there? This is Miss Perney. Are you there? I'm calling because some of us ladies were talking. It's been brought to our attention that some of the lovely ladies from the community, they've offered to help you get settled in and get acquainted with the town. And it sounds like you've spurned each and every one of them. So, as I said, the ladies and I were talking. And we love all people here in Plum Rose. But Pete, do you like girls? Because if you don't, we have some lovely men in this town as well. Thomas over at the smokehouse? Great fella. Pete, you sure you're not there? This is Miss Perney. Just checking on you. I'll stop by the store. We can figure this whole thing out. Number 9. Pete. I'm going to call you Pete. I'll be available this coming Sunday in the afternoon to deliver that mower, zero turn. If I don't hear from you, I'll take it that you want me to bring it by for that test drive. Okay. All right. See you Sunday. 10. Pete, my man. Willie Faulkner here. I understand you and Stephanie are planning a night on the town. Well, I just wanted you to know I think that's great. Also, I spoke with a couple of the family members in that land we talked about right behind your house. I think I can convince them to sell. Let's talk about it After you've had dinner with Stephanie. All right. Willie out. Pete was exhausted and prayed it was over, but it wasn't. There were 2 more messages. Mr. McDuffie, my name is Beth Hollister. You don't know me, and I apologize for calling. I'm calling for my daughter. She's written a book, a children's book. A lot of pictures, but also a cute story. At least her mom thinks so. Well, we don't know anything about books. You're the only one that we thought might be able to help us. I'm not much help, and I was wondering if you would look at her book and give her some honest advice. It would mean the world to her. Again, my name is Beth. My daughter's name is Molly. Thank you. And last. Sorry, Beth again. My number is 555-619-2123. The end. Pete was exhausted and needed some fresh air. From his back porch, he could hear someone mowing off in the distance. If they had Ralphie's zero-turn mower, they could have been done by now, Pete said out loud. Chapter 14. The following morning, Pete went for a short jog, had a small breakfast, dressed in a nice pair of slacks, a long-sleeved dress shirt, with a tie, no jacket. He tried one on, but thought it was a bit much. Then he jumped in his truck and headed out. He decided to head into town and let the Lord lead him where he wanted to go to church today. When he saw it, he'd know. So, that's what he did. He passed several before pulling into the parking lot of the Southern Baptist Church of Bishop County. The yard was recently cut, the building looked in good shape, the few vehicles in the lot looked like they were either new or well maintained. None of this really mattered. He knew that. But we're all human, and we notice things. Walking in, he could hear music playing, from what he assumed was the worship hall, so that's where he headed. Inside, the pianist was practicing her songs. They were lovely. But for the few cars that were in the lot, he thought there'd be folks inside. Then he remembered a lot of churches have prayer groups before service, so he took a seat in the back row and enjoyed the music. Pete closed his eyes and listened to the beautiful music coming from the stage. He didn't know the song, but it was very relaxing, and the woman playing it was very good. Hearing chatter, Pete opened his eyes as people started to walk from the side rooms into the main hall. At first, he didn't think much about it, but as soon as the room began to fill and looks were more and more directed towards him, he had that sinking feeling in his stomach. To this point, he was the only Caucasian in the room, and he prayed for at least one more to walk through the door. When the Reverend Paul Samuel walked over and introduced himself, Pete stood and quickly apologized. He didn't know what else to do. The Reverend smiled and said with a deep voice, "No need to apologize. You're welcome here any time, friend. Visiting the area?" "No, sir. I moved here a while back. Opened the bookstore downtown, and well, as you can see, I'm looking for the right church home." "Bookstore, you say? Okay, great. What's the name of your bookstore?" Pete sheepishly replied, "The bookstore?" Paul Samuel laughed so hard and laughed, and the room began to become silent and still. The Reverend made Pete feel right at home, comfortable, and that pit in his stomach quickly became a pebble. Still. It was still there, but it was much smaller. The music was great, the sermon even better, but it was a long service, long, as in almost 2 hours, and it seemed like they could have gone on another couple hours. When it was over, many of the members welcomed Pete and said they hoped they'd see him again. He couldn't know if they meant it, but he hoped so, because he enjoyed the service immensely. He stood in line to shake hands with the Reverend when the service was over, and when he shook Paul's hand, he told him how much he appreciated the sermon on being a light and what it meant to him. Outside, he felt a little awkward as groups gathered, talked, laughed, but he told himself it'd be like that anywhere. He was the new guy and needed to find his place. Then he'd have a group to talk to and laugh with himself. Chapter 15. That afternoon, Pete rotated between the front and back porch, waiting for his new best friend to show up with that zero-turn mower he'd heard so much about. He figured if he wasn't there, Ralphie would leave it in the driveway. He had no intention of buying the thing. It sounded like a lot more mower than he would ever need, but at this point, he was kind of curious to hear the young man's sales pitch, to be honest. While he waited, he reached out to Beth from the answering machine. She sounded surprised he had returned the call. They spoke for a short time and agreed that she and Molly would stop by the store this coming week and introduce themselves and bring a copy of the book for his review. When he hung up, he heard the sound of the car door out front. Coming around the corner, he saw the old man sitting behind the wheel of an old but well-maintained Buick. He nodded, but made no movement to get out of the vehicle. To his left he heard, "Well, aren't you just the talk of the town these days? Money, apparently single, nice little business, and likes to go to the only all-black church in the county." Miss Purney was standing there on the porch with her hands on her hips. Pete, ignoring her comment, said, "Good afternoon. My, don't you look lovely today, Mrs. Purney. A new driver, I see." With a huff, she was off the porch. "Pete, you don't know how this makes me look in front of my people. Last week, and then this?" It took everything he had, but Pete smiled, and in the calmest voice he could muster, said, "Mrs. Purney, I like you a lot. You're straightforward, seem to have a good heart, and I respect what you do for the community. But when it comes to my personal life, I like to keep things close to myself, at least until I get to know someone really well. Do you understand that?" "Well, I sure do. I'm hearing you loud and clear." And with that, she was gone. The rest of Sunday wasn't much better. The race he wanted to watch was rained out. Ralphie finally showed with the mower, damaged it, trying to take it off the trailer, and hinted that Pete may be responsible for the repair. That night he fixed a drink. He didn't have alcohol much, but he kept some in the cabinet, for occasions just like this. The back porch was becoming one of his favorite spots. The woods provided a plethora of entertainment depending on the time of day. Squirrels playfully chasing each other, deer coming out just far enough to get the good grass. Birds. It was better than most of what was on TV. With that thought, he did think, Cece was right. Old soul. And that concludes this episode. I hope you're enjoying A Church for Pete. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.